is horrible. Why doesn't somebody do this for a living?
Oh, yes. Oh, my goodness. Yes. Thank you. It's, one of the things that's amazing about working with older adults is that you go home at the end of the day, even if they've been difficult and it's been really hard work, you go home and know that you ease somebody's burden big time. It's not like making fidget spinners. You really transform their lives. And it's such an honor and just such a pleasure. Uh, And so I just thought people have homes filled with stuff, treasures, heirlooms, and then everything else that isn't so great. And often older adults have lived in their homes for anywhere from 20 to 40, or in one case, 89 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and there's so much sentimental attachment to things. I mean, moving stinks at any age. You can be 22 with a backpack and it's still hard to move. I don't call it relocation, I call it dislocation because you're going to feel kind of out of joint until you've been there about a month or so and know the neighborhood. It's even harder, obviously, for older adults, especially if they have any little inkling of cognitive impairment, dementia. It just can be exacerbated unless it's done with a lot of compassion and know-how. And that's what we bring to the work that we do, whether it's sorting and downsizing, floor planning, making sure everything is packed, and supervising move day, unpacking, and setting up the home, especially if it's in an older, like a senior living community, assisted living or something like that, so that it feels like a reflection of the home they've left behind. So it feels familiar. And then afterwards, we deal with all the remaining items that remain in the house through estate sale services, donating ideally. And then when we often have to have bring in a haulaway company to take away trash because it's there. But it's just so hard. It's knowing how to communicate with the older adult and let them know, no, you're not just throwing it out. We're gonna donate it. And sometimes what can help them let go of something is to just let them tell the story about it.
Wow.
Yeah. And then
Wow.
they can let it go. Yeah.
I'm sure you're familiar with the book by Marie Kondo, the poof, life changing power of tidying up or something like that.
Yeah. And when
And
she finally had a kid, she realized her method did not work.
there you go. But one of the processes she had that maybe speaks to that point is that rather than just throw things away, she would hold it and say thank you for serving me, and then throw it away. I didn't go that far. I didn't really need that, but psychologically, I think appreciating that you're getting rid of things because they serve their purpose. Like this is the end life, and just like we all have an end life of some sort, to understand that material has an end life and not to have to hold on to it. So
Yeah.
yeah, so it's interesting, and the book was great, but life isn't quite that simple, I don't think. So let's
No,
talk about. I'm sure you have a whole wide range of cases. What's the most common case that you get that you feel this is the one that we do really well and we get this one regularly? What's it look like in terms of size and amount of material, amount of steps and things like that? What's the most common case for you?
every situation is completely unique. It's just
Yeah.
wild. Um, but primarily, our financial engine involves move management and sometimes it includes clearing out because someone has passed away. We're hoarding specialists. We love a good hoard. All kinds of treasures in there. But it's really, they're moving to assisted living and they've been in their home of, a couple of, 3 bedrooms, a garage, 2 level, sometimes a shed in the back or what have you. And they're moving into a 1 bedroom in assisted living. And also they're dreading it. I literally had one client, I've been doing this 11 and a half years. I think this is about my 3rd year in, I think. And she said to me, I feel like I'm moving to the place I'm going to die.
Right.
And underneath it all, for many of them, that's what they're thinking, either consciously or subconsciously.
Right.
And
Right.
so recognizing that they're underneath it all, they're feeling like this is the last place I'm going to live. And I'm leaving the home I've known so well. And if they've lost a spouse, if they've passed away, they're doing this alone and going to the community where maybe they might have 1 or 2 friends who live there too, or they know no one.
Most
But
commonly, yeah.
yeah, but it's extraordinary because in these communities, there are activities. There are people who are your contemporaries, so they remember the 60s or the 70s the way you do, not as an infant or a very young adult. They remember it. And there are so many shared experiences that they can talk about. There's a lot to do, and people can take care of them.
I've been through this with my parents as well as my wife's parents. So 4 times, and you hit right in the head. They assume, well, this is where I'm going to go to die. And my reaction intellectually was, well, if you don't move there, you're going to die here. Like, you're going to die from somewhere, right? And second, you mentioned going from a house or a townhome to a 1-bedroom place. And, when I go and visited, and we're trying to get them into the place, I'm thinking, well, this is great. There's like community areas, but you have to clean it. You have to organize it. The food's all prepared for you. You don't have to do the dishes. Like, I'll move in if you like it. But
Right? Yeah.
easy for me to say, for them, they feel like they're really hitting the end of the line. And it's difficult. So where in the process, I imagine are you getting inquiries from the facility, or excuse me, where do you get involved?
They call them communities, unless it's a skilled nursing facilities.
Excuse me.
And I get it. No, it's okay. It's just one of those things that I was told repeatedly early on because I kept doing it. But you were saying, I'm sorry, what were you saying about the communities?
No, I find them really lovely, but I guess, are you working with the communities and they're introducing you to families? Or are you working with families and then are you involved with helping them find the right community? Because that's a tough job, finding the right community. That's a whole nother business, I think.
It is. It really is. Usually we are brought in after they've chosen the place to move. Now, that's not to say that they may change their mind and move somewhere else, but we often then just help them move to that place. But yes, marketing directors at communities are very kind to us by referring them. They also know that we do this really well. The people, by the way, so you were talking about finding the perfect community. I want to talk about another kind of professional. First of all, the communities are very different. They fall into different categories. There's assisted living. There's independent living. There's something called a CCRC, Continuing Care Retirement Communities. And then there's also board and cares, or here we sometimes call them 6-packs in the trade. It's a small home. It's really great for people who have late stage dementia. It's 24-hour care, 7 days a week. And so those are wonderful, but trying to understand all these different kinds of communities and what's right for you is tricky. There are also I have to remember how they put it now, senior residence specialists, also known as placement agencies. For free to the client, they will help them find the ideal community for them. And they are paid by the community if and when the person moves in. But they know what the community looks like. How easy is it to get around? Because you have to think about that in terms of mobility. You also have to think of finances. And just as importantly as all that, what's the personality of the community? There's a wonderful place of CCRC, Villa Gardens in Pasadena. They have all these people from JPL there, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. So they're fascinating. And it's really fun for us to work with them because, they were on one of the early, they were a project manager for one of the early Mars missions or something like that. It's fascinating.
Wow. Question from a regular attendee, Michael White, says, I think senior move management and downsizing is very labor intensive. How do you find and keep sufficient labor?
You hit the ball on the head in terms of how difficult that can be. Over all these years, I've become so particular. And so we're not as big as I would like us to be, but at the same time, I know we can do a really good job for our clients. It is very hard, especially in Los Angeles with all the big distances and things, to find the people who make good employees. And mind you, especially if you're talking to a company who does what we do, ask them specifically if their colleagues are employees or are they subcontractors? Because having them as employees makes such a big difference. First of all my employees get along really well with one another. They're used to working with each other. Plus, they know that all of the different taxes are pretty much taken care of for them. And most importantly, they're trained in similar methods. And they know that they're taken care of. They know each other. As opposed to a subcontractor who can be brought in, and I forgot another important thing, they're not insured. So my employees are covered by workers' comp as well as liability and the other insurances, but workers' comp, so that if somebody trips and falls and your home gets injured, My company, Clear Home Solutions, covers that. It's not up to the homeowner. Whereas with the subcontractor, they could go after the homeowner. So you need to be protected that way. That's very important. The key thing, Michael, that I've learned to look for, is empathy. People call that a soft skill. It is a hard skill. Honestly, if you don't have empathy, you really can't acquire it. You can acquire technical skills and things like that. You can learn to code, but empathy is a feeling built into us.
Right.
And without that, you can't do this kind of work. You really have to be able to put yourself in the other person's shoes and be a great listener. And not tell them what to do or what they ought to do or anything, but talk to them and ask the right questions so they can make their own decisions. But they're just questions that maybe they haven't been asked yet. I hope that answers your question.
I think you did. You know, as a businessman, I don't have any employees. I only work with contractors because I don't have the kind of intensive customer experience that you do. When you say that to me, I know that you have a much larger expense, but it also tells me you're committed to a much deeper level of interaction with a customer that some of the contractors can't do. And so those listening, it's easy. We all make decisions based on the cheapest, but you have to know the cheapest is going to be for a reason. And anybody who has employees, for the most part, and also the longevity, when you have employees, they're there continuously at some level, versus contractors by their nature come and go, and they do a bad job, they'll go and get hired somewhere else and leave you with holding the bag as a customer or as the referring source.
Yeah. And also, I will say too, they talk about ageism. If anything, I'm ageist towards people being older. If anything, because they have often they've gone through their own experience or are going through it.
Right.
And and especially when it comes to the empathy and understanding of how people work, how they behave, and again, being patient, that takes time to acquire. And so, you'll rarely see somebody in their 20s on my staff for that reason.
That's the opportunity for those of us who are experienced. I mean, really, I should be out of the business. 5-10 years ago, I would have been aged out because there'd be younger people who could compete. But I believe with technology and for a lot of reasons, there's opportunities for those of us who are older to compete and leverage our experience, our contacts, and using technology that doesn't exist otherwise. And in your case, their experience and their personal lived experience becomes an asset rather than a liability for somebody who's younger. So, excellent point.
Very much so. And that's the truth with a number of other professions who offer senior services. The people who are geriatric care managers or people who do placement. Honestly, the best ones I know are a bit older than they're not. If they're millennials, they're older millennials as opposed to younger. We're usually Gen X. And even tail end of the baby boomer. I'm 62, so I'm actually the tail.
Whoa! I was just my head trying to figure your age out. You throw out your 62. You can't do that. Like, wow, mind blown.
Well, very kind of you. Thank
Good.
you.
As you were saying that, I'm trying. How old is she? I look in the back. You have like a little antique picture, a little antique pillow.
Oh.
I said, this gal is trying to look older than she is. I want trying to cover up for her. How old is she? 62. Yeah. Wow, good for you.
That's actually I have to go like this. My great grandmother.
Wow.
My father's grandmother. He adored her.
Wow, very nice. Okay, long time and good friend of the show, Matthew Price. He's actually a realtor and an auctioneer in, I think, North Carolina, if I remember right. And so one thing he talks about is having, I hit the wrong one, that sometimes people, I think in your profession, when I say profession, people work with seniors and the transition tend to add a few tools to the toolbox, one or two that might require a license or require good training, good experience, don't have it and cause problems. Now, I know the laws vary by state. You're in California like I am. You have a national association. Matthew's in North Carolina. Talk a little bit about licensing and where you see competitors maybe venturing into areas that they shouldn't be to the detriment of the customers.
Well, it's interesting because you mentioned the carrying transitions franchises. I really recommend finding, if you're going to work with a senior move manager, find one who is a member of NASM. NASMM, which stands for, are you ready? The
Yes.
National Association of Senior and Specialty Move Managers,
Nice.
NASMM.org, because we are required to be insured. Oh, thank you. That's great. Yes. We're required to be insured. There is such great training that NASM offers. It's extraordinary. And there are a few Caring Transitions franchises that have chosen to join NASM, but not all. And they do offer kind of estate sale auctions on their websites. And yeah, there needs to be certain licensing for that and so on. We do estate sales, but we partner with a company called Max Sold. They are fully licensed. That's their métier, but we work with them to organize things, create the various lots for the auction, and we have a great symbiotic relationship with them. But yeah, make sure they're a member of NASM. And you might also want to make sure that they are a certified senior move manager. I, being the nerd, was the first senior move manager of the company, and then also accreditation, because it's based on a lot of experience and also your business practices, because they literally look through your operations manual to make sure you have one, first of all, and that you're doing things correctly. So that's one way to find someone who's really good. That was a great question. Thank you for bringing that up.
What was the certification organization again that I think you run or that you're affiliated with?
Well, I have a few from different organizations, but the ones that I'm speaking to are from NASM, NASM.org.
Got it.
And I was the certified senior move manager is for a single person. And then accreditation is for the whole company.
Got it.
So sometimes companies are sold and the accreditation goes with them. Yeah, there you go.
Got it. Very
yeah.
nice.
And I'm also actually a certified professional organizer with NAPO, National Association of Productivity and Organizing. And I also have a CAP certification, which is the Certified Aging in Place Specialist that I got from the NAHB, the National Association of Home Builders. I'm a very nerdy girl. So there you go.
Good for you. Okay.
Thank you.
Well, no, thank you. And I think it's important to, I know that a lot of real estate agents in particular are down on our national association. It's easy to put them down. It's a lot harder to get involved and make it better. And I know personally, I know in particular our state is so effective at giving us tools to be better at our job to help our customers. And so it's great to see somebody who's promoting their professional association. I would say if you can't do that, you're in the wrong profession.
That's a very good point. And to be honest, we also at NASM, we have a hard time getting people to run for the board. And it just shocks me because the way our board is run, it's not a whole lot of work. And I have found, I think with a lot of people, when you're on the boards and things like that, and you mention to a potential client, they're impressed by that. And so it's really worth doing. Yeah.
Definitely. And then my favorite comment so far is on LinkedIn. Excellent show. Thank you.
It is an excellent show. Phil does a great job. It's wonderful.
Feel free. The comments go to the top are Bill is right or Bill's both good looking and charming. Either one will get you the front of the line.
There we go. And I was going to say, especially since a large number of your listeners are realtors, one of the things we do really is to move along. It helps both the realtor. It also helps any communities that this client might be moving toward. Because one of the things it's hard for placement agencies, it's especially hard for the individual communities, is people will come and literally they stay in touch with them for years because it can take that long to get somebody to move in, if they move at all, because they just don't understand why communities are so helpful when you're getting older. And so with the realtor, we help get it cleared out. I call it making it realtor ready for sale or lease. And
Nice.
The key thing to look for is great communication. It's in any work, right, Bill? But great communication with the other vendors involved or communities or realtors so that everybody's more or less on the same page, especially because, sometimes getting the client to move out, in other words, downsize sufficiently to move them to the community, can really take a while, especially if there's a hoarding situation.
Right.
But if they're going to move past, if we're going to have to move past the deadline, we make sure everybody knows.
It's so important, and that's the purpose of this, of having you as opposed to just attorneys. A lot of realtors say, well, what's the point? And the answer is that when we work with others, we can do so much more. 1 + 1 becomes 3 when we work together. And I look back on my business and where I worked with vendors or attorneys that we work together, everything fell into place and moved more quickly. Where we're all different, while it's nice to have new relationships and it's important to grow, it's always harder. It's always harder to figure out, how do you do things? How do I do things? How do I not step on your toes? How do I not sell in a way that makes your job harder and vice versa? So those are good points. Let me just go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I was just going to say that one of the delights in marketing and doing sales in my industry is that if you sound salesy at all, you are out the door.
Yeah.
It's about being passionate. Honestly, I found that one of the best things I could say when someone would call to ask about our services was, "Oh, what's going on?" Because they finally had, and they were thrilled because they finally had something who really wanted to hear them talk about it. And that just helps. And there are so many different kinds of professions. Bill, I think I mentioned I'm launching a new company called Agewise Alliance. Agewise Alliance.
Wow.
And it's where older adults and their families will go to find the answers and professionals they need for all of later life's challenges. I have 80 professions listed in the glossary of professions and explained. And I'm about to add a few more. People
Nice.
don't know that there's so much help out there for them. Thank you for showing
Yeah.
that. And each one is defined, especially for attorneys and things like that, the definition, so people can understand what different people do. So they're more educated and it's less stressful for everybody. It's a very easy site to navigate. Right now, it's only for Southern California. We will eventually go nationwide, but right now it's for proof of concept, where I'm onboarding professionals right now. So if you're interested, you can email me at marty@clearhomesolutions.com or marty@agewisealliance.com, or bug Bill, and he'll make sure I have it. And then we'll go out to consumers in Southern California. I'm aiming for mid-September. But yet, it's to educate people, and there are so many kinds of professionals who can help older adults, but they can also help facilitate your work as well to move things along. And one of the things I forgot, depending, especially if it's probate, and you may, you have people fighting, and you may well need a list of what's in the home. Since the beginning, we've offered home inventories where we go in as that neutral third party and document everything, sometimes just photographically. Other times, when it's legal, it gets really detailed. I think the biggest one we've kicked out so far is 430 plus pages. So you may want to find and get to know some company near you that does home inventories, just so you have them in your back pocket.
Fantastic. Audra points out, so important for us to be on the same page. It's such a difference.
Audra.
I'm working on a different project where I have an attorney, fiduciary, probate attorney, and then they bring in a state accountant. I know all of them. And so it's a whole different experience. I've never had that happen before. She asked me to put the link. I put the link in the notes for agewisealliance.com. And I'm going to reach out to you because, Marty, I have another friend who's on the East Coast doing the same kind of thing, similar, that you guys might want to collaborate a little bit or talk about how to work together.
I love
So
it.
I may know to reach out to you tomorrow to follow up on that. Let me just take a quick break and kind of do some housekeeping for those of you watching. Welcome to Probate Weekly. We do this every Thursday. We're actually moving next week, both the time and the format. Our roots were a Zoom call, and I stopped doing it because it just wasn't enough participation, and part was the time slot. So we're moving the time slot to 9 a.m. Thursday morning, and Pacific time. Anybody who's registered will get email reminders and invitations and such, but you'll need to register and come on the Zoom if you want to be in the Zoom, or you can continue to watch it live stream on YouTube or a replay. We have a Facebook group as well. So that's starting next week, August 8th, will be 9 a.m. Pacific time, 12 p.m. noon Eastern time. And it'll be a Zoom call. Look for that invitation. Love to have you join us there. Continue the conversation on Facebook. Our group is Probate Weekly. So if you jump in there, you can ask questions, post your probate content. Love to have you promote yourself there. If you want to sign up, go to probateweekly.com. Just put in your email and you'll be registered and get reminders. Scroll down if you want to get it on audio formats or see past episodes on YouTube. Our guest today, Marty is with Clear Home Solutions. She's the CEO, founder, clearhomesolutions.com. We'll have that in the show notes as well. And then she talked about the Agewise Alliance.com, which currently is only in Southern California. Watch for that to blow up nationally and be a great tool for all of us to use together to collaborate.
It's so important. I first got the idea several years ago because I realized no one knew senior move managers existed. And if I'm in a conversation with 7 people I don't know, I will inevitably be asked at least one or even both questions I'm about to say. One is like, where were you 6 years ago? And the other is, you do that? Because they realize that they need something like that. And so I realized there were all these different professions that people and services that people were not aware of. And so that inspired Agewise Alliance.
Exciting. Okay, so let's talk a bit about when you get involved. This is going so deep, and I'm not even halfway through my question.
I love it. I'm happy to. Thank you.
You got well.
Oh.
I'm sorry. I've been battling a cold for weeks here.
I figured. I'm so sorry to hear that.
It's okay. Thanks. People who don't use you, or when you come in halfway through, what are the biggest mistakes you've seen made that perhaps you could have prevented?
Yeah, well, sometimes also we're called in after they've let go of another company. And if that's the case, it's usually because they have not been compassionate enough. They've been telling them, you have to get rid of this. Why do you have all these things? They're very judgmental. And the whole thing is you can't judge. Everybody's brain is built differently. And especially with this particular generation of older adults, they were the greatest generation and they were the deprivation generation. They went through the Depression, World War II, and even if they were born just shortly after that, all of their parents' stress and worry and concerns got inflicted on them. So that's why it's hard for them to let go of everything, because they think everything has a value, and why they just can't, they have such a hard time accepting help, because when they were younger, they could not be a burden. Right. So that it's part of that psychology. Additionally, we'll be brought in because the family members have tried to do it, and it's just not happening soon enough. There's often a deadline involved or something like that. Somebody may have gotten injured, like the older adult may have fallen trying to work on the move. When we come in, we do have to, if there are any packed boxes, we kind of move them around a little bit to see if everything inside is tight. Frequently it's not, so we open them up and repack them to make it, because we're very good at packing. The only complaint we've really had about our packing is that we use too much paper, to which I always reply, did anything break? No. Well, that's why we use all the paper to make sure you're safe. But it's frequently just because they're running out of time, or they thought one of their adult kids was going to come in from out of town to help them, and suddenly that adult child got either a new project or a new job, or they just could not figure out how to do it. So that's when frequently when we are brought in. Most often we're brought in from the beginning, which is really helpful.
That's ideal, right? I mean, that's really what you hope for. That way you're not cleaning up somebody else's mess. I know I get involved where you have like this toxic relationship between typically the daughter and the mother is the most common one I find, where the husband, well-intentioned, brings people in and wants to take care of his mom, but kind of delegates the task to his wife, who maybe over 20-year marriage, they had a bad relationship to begin with. Now you're taking a very stressful emotional situation for mom, putting in the toxic relationship. And to your point, the daughter's always, why do you have this? Why do you need all this stuff? Because she didn't grow up with it, right? Whereas, the actual daughter wouldn't say that, or maybe the actual daughter does. And so there's these relationships that you build on. And I think that's why I'm always glad to get professionals who are better at that than I am, and let me learn and step in when I have to and not when I don't have to.
Yeah, we know how to ease the tension. And when we we have various ways to kind of take people to neutral corners, we find, we kind of redirect them just to let us settle down. Because honestly, especially the older adult, but also it affects every generation. I've had grandkids crying in my arms because of what's going on with their grandpa or grandma.
Sure.
So it comes out in all kinds of ways. For example, when I'm training new employees, I will say, so they will not let go of this pencil. It's shortening. It's all, why do you want to keep a hold of this? Well, yes, you address the pencil and just say, okay, I get it. You want it. Okay, let's keep that pencil. And then start saying, how are you feeling? This is hard work. This is hard work for you. So how are you feeling? Do you want a glass of water? Maybe, do you want a little break for yourself? I can pack up these other things that you've chosen to take. And just and find ways to do that so you can get at the bigger issue, which is that they're terrified. And they're moving and they're overwhelmed and they're scared. And that also goes for the adult kids,
Right.
because they're scared too. One of the things I make a point of when I have a moment with the adult children is I'll say, thank you for doing this. I realize your parent may not be thanking you, but thank you. And then they'll often say, oh, well, I need help. It's like, no, thank you. Because we work with a lot of older adults who either don't have kids or the kids just want stuff from them and are no help whatsoever and are sometimes mean. So it's just important to acknowledge that the tensions are there, and sometimes they're the people who will bring up every single grievance they went through as a child. And and especially after somebody has passed away and you realize they're going to eat up any money they inherited by going to the courts, because they'll pay all these legal fees. There's going to be nothing left. So please find a way to get along. And when you're dealing with either money or stuff, those aren't the people, those aren't the memories. You have the memories, they live in your heart. And so especially with items, that can, thinking that way can kind of help let go of things. And also when you talk to an older adult in that way who's going through this, also we work with people who are younger and they have their own stressors going on. Yeah. So it's later life is a very emotional time. Both ends of life are usually chaotic, painful, confusing, and unpredictable. And somebody once said to me, we all remember being 5 years old. We don't remember being 95, right. Unless, of course, you're older than that. Right. And that's why, with services for children and their parents, they're understood more. Whereas for later life, our culture does not want to talk about it. And so that's why things end up in probate so frequently. There wasn't a will. They were in denial,
Yep.
And yeah. One of the goals for me with Agewise Alliance is to make sure people are educated. I think it's going to be the adult kids who are going to be going to Agewise Alliance. So they'll be helping their parents, but also they'll be getting educated about what's out there. And so my goal is to make my generation more comfortable with moving toward later life and planning for it.
Well, like anything in life, if you plan and prepare, you get a better result, right? So part of this channel, I've really emphasized not probate alone, but avoiding probate through proper estate planning. And with this proper estate planning, then you bring in other professionals that can say, hey, look, you don't need to move out now. But like in my case, I'm 65. My wife is 65 as well. She's a cancer survivor, so she's struggling a little bit physically, but doing well, thank God. But our bedroom's upstairs. And while today it's great, and I don't mind it, there will be a day that's a problem. I will say today it's a problem in that I can carry things up and down. She can't so much. But like, for example, we want to replace furniture. Well, that becomes a little more of a challenge. So it's one of those things where the earlier you start playing on these things and think about, well, where do you want to be? Where do you want to be for the next 20 years? This isn't going to work for us for 20 years. This is going to work for us for 5 years, 10 years maybe. So we got to think about that. And the earlier we plan, the earlier that process works out.
Actually, I've had clients who are in their 70s, like even early 70s, especially if they're moving to a really beautiful community. They'll say, I want to move there now so I can enjoy it.
Yes.
For years first.
Yeah.
Which makes so much sense.
My mother did that when she remarried, and my father passed. She was widowed, remarried to a great man, and they lived in this senior adult community. But it was really just adult in terms of age. It wasn't medical services or anything. But I had a golf course, beautiful pool, beautiful community room, all kinds of activities. I kept thinking, I like to live here. It's pretty nice.
Right.
Now, it was a long ways from where we live, so it's not quite what we're looking for, but it was really nice. I mean, I think, why wouldn't you want to live like that if you have a chance to enjoy it? And there's upgrades. So.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about business development, because I know one of the hatch, you obviously run your business, you give service to people who need, transitional services, but you also have to develop the business. So what percentage of your time today is developing new business, and what does that look like for you today?
Well, it's interesting because our clients are frequently one-offs. Now, I will say frequently down the line, a couple of years later, they may come back. Let's say we helped somebody move into a community. Well, their adult children might call and say, "Well, they passed away, so we need to," that kind of thing. But usually, I always remember it's mostly a one-off, and so it's really getting to know the referral sources, the estate planning attorneys, probate attorneys, trusted attorneys, family law attorneys, because there's a lot of later life divorce going on right now.
A lot. That's amazing.
Yeah. Also fiduciaries, people who do senior residential placement. And that way, they know us, they know that we do great work. And those are the repeat clients, so to speak, because they have continual clients in ways that they're a one-off for them too. So we all it's a very symbiotic relationship.
So for those listening, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Just for those listening, the real estate agents, my job is not to find people who need to sell a house. My job is to find people who know people who need to sell houses regularly, help them with their business so that I become the partner. That's really the goal.
Yeah. Yeah. And for realtors, get to know the marketing directors at your local senior living communities. 100%. Because people don't know, and especially there's a specific designation, SRES, it stands for Senior Real Estate Specialist. That indicates that you have done the proper coursework and that you really now know how to work with older adults and their families. And you mentioned that to marketing directors at senior living communities, and it's really great. And sometimes offer to do presentations. One great presentation is to pair up with, say, a senior move manager like me and do a presentation at a community explaining what it takes to move, because the expertise that you have with senior moves, and then also, this person knows how to take you through the process of a move. So that can be very effective.
And I think one of the things you said, again, for those listening, we're talking to a professional here, is partnering with somebody else. Because I know when I built my first phase of my real estate business was mortgages, and I partnered with somebody where I did primarily fixed rate mortgages, and in those days, different companies did adjustable rate mortgages. I would partner with him and promote his business. He promoted my business. I found it easier to brag about him, and he found it easier to brag about me. It doesn't come across as self-serving. I'm being of service, but we both got in together. And then when I get a deal and they wanted to adjust a mortgage, I'd flip it to him and vice versa. So it's really important, I think, in this business to find as many partners as you can to work together.
It helps so much. Towards the beginning, maybe second year, third year, I partnered with Courtney Hoganson, who then had an in-home care company, and she was also a care manager. And we would go around to communities, and it was wonderful because that's what you were saying. We would brag about each other. And also it was 3 people in the meeting as opposed to just one-on-one. And there's something kind of magical when it's a very different meeting when there are 3 people as opposed to just 2. And so we had so much fun. By the way, actually, Courtney has a great new company called Call Light. It's call-light.com. You can hire nurses to come in to your home and give you a shot or do a medical thing, because there are certain things caregivers cannot do. They're not allowed to. Change a port or something like that. And it's just great. She's a phenomenal entrepreneur, very smart in business, and just a lovely person. She's just great.
Well, and it is magical when you're 3. I think, without getting into politics, we've never had a president run for office and get elected, but maybe one who wasn't married. Why? In a day when so many people aren't married, why is that? Because there's something about the fact that somebody thinks you're worth living with is kind of a stamp of approval, right? And you meet my wife and you say, who the heck would ever put up with this guy? And you meet her and go, wow, she'd put up with him. I guess maybe I can. And I think there's some truth to that. So in business, when you work with somebody, you are really getting a stamp of approval or testimonial is very powerful. And I also know that we all need some accountability. And one of my team members in Florida, she's the probate nurse, and she calls on senior home relocation specialists with a partner and different partners, because she just likes that. They get the car together, they go together, they have lunch together. It's fun. They're getting into action, and so I think there's something about working with other people that's very powerful if you need to get started in that.
It's so you have an ally, and when you go to meet with an attorney or a marketing director, you have your ally with you, and you can like I say, it's so much easier to brag about somebody else, and it just also it looks better that you're bragging about one another, not necessarily yourself. So.
Now, along the way, you've come across real estate agents. I know some refer your business and earn your referrals back. Others you've come across in the course of your business. What are one or two of the biggest mistakes you've seen real estate agents do that you go, they just haven't really thought things through, or we're paying attention?
They don't get it. Like they don't get it or something. It's often not being patient with the moving process, because they'll complain about how somebody's not going fast enough. And, it has its own rhythm. I actually just read a couple of articles today about issues with senior living communities have become very corporatized.
Yes.
And so that means you have number crunchers. And for example, Brookdale, for example, I'm just quoting an article from the Washington Post talking about how they decided to add an algorithm. They started, timing how long it took somebody to do something, like give somebody a shower or get them dressed for the morning or get them downstairs for dinner. And so they used that and they put that in the algorithm to determine how many staff members they need. The thing is, every older adult, every senior is different, and and some days will be great and some days will be really difficult. And so to use just an algorithm to determine staffing, especially during something like COVID, is foolish. And so they've gotten in quite a bit of trouble. There are lawsuits and things like that. So algorithms are great when you're doing maybe an e-commerce site or something like that. But when you're working with older adults and their families, and you're the realtor handling basically their biggest financial asset in 99% of the cases, there's going to be so much emotion involved. There's going to be those lovely family dynamics that we all get to deal with. Oh, joy. And you just have to realize it can be unpredictable. You can have a target date to put it on the market, but realize it might take longer. Sometimes it happens faster. I have a team who can be very efficient, but our tagline is where compassion meets know-how. It's knowing also when you have to really take care of somebody and get to know them. When we're working with a hoarding situation, for example, we don't just pull up the dump truck and toss everything away, because we recognize there's a reason this person collected all these things, and they're embarrassed and probably frustrated with themselves, but they don't know where to start. And so one of the first things, the first thing we have to do is establish trust and assure them we're not judging them. We're here to help you move move and get it ready for the realtor. And frequently during the first session, and maybe even part of the second, nothing necessarily goes in a trash bag. Maybe a few things get set aside for donation, but we need to build that trust and get a feel for what this client values and what kind of questions work best for them, like telling the story of the item, then they can let it go. Or just sometimes, we'll talk keep, donate, and trash in terms of piles. But for other people, this worked especially effectively with one client I worked with. It's friends, acquaintances, and strangers. So the friends you keep. The acquaintances, maybe you're not so sure. And then there are the strangers that you can let go, because you haven't seen them in 5 years or something like that. I find often with that middle pile, the acquaintance pile, or the maybe, you can also call it the maybe pile. Often when it's just all those things have had a chance to sit there, they can be often there. Many of them are let go. So it's that psychological dance, and we have to figure out who that person is.
I'm always hesitant when real estate agents will talk about the seller, as a hoarder, sometimes it's just a physical thing. You go out and buy groceries and you cook and whatever, and you're left with things you don't use. You go out and buy more. To get rid of it requires the physical strength to put things in a garbage bag, take it out. Like in my house, the garbage, 4 days a week, it's here, and then we put it in the front yard for the pickup. So you have to walk out the door and carry it. For me, it's not a problem at this stage of my life. My wife can't really do it now, so it sits there. And so I can see where, I've seen where it's just not even as much psychological as physically. They're just having a hard time keeping up with everything it takes to live their life. And so the compassion comes from not being judgmental to say, well, it's not that they're psychologically wanting to hold on to all the garbage. It's just a lot of work, and they're tired, and they're older, and they're pain from whatever they fell down. They're still in pain because they never got the medical care they needed. And so we have to be really careful, I think, about when we put labels on people. Be very careful. It's not quite always that psychological issue that we look at.
Yeah, and you hit it spot on. I've had so many adult children call and say, well, my dad's a hoarder.
Yeah.
And I go there, and the kitchen's okay. The living room, like the TV room, wherever they watch TV, is okay. Their bedroom is okay. And yeah, other rooms are just piled high with stuff. But is it because they're not as strong and they get fatigued easily? So that, that your dad isn't a hoarder. He's just older.
I read like 25 books a year. Well, they accumulate, and nobody wants to buy them. And even Goodwill now doesn't take them because people don't buy the books at the Goodwill store. Harder and harder to get rid of with piles of books. And it's not just because I'm lazy. It's like, what the heck do I do with them? And same with other things. We buy a lot of paper goods. With inflation and COVID, it makes sense to have more inventory than you had. And my wife might forget, well, we bought 2 or 3 of these things. Now we have 5 or 6 of them. As you get older, that gets harder. But you need salt because you're cooking, so you buy another salt. You come back, you realize you have 8 salt containers that you bought. So it's not really that you're hoarding it. It's just your purchase system and your inflow and outflow degrades over time. And I think we have to be sensitive to that. Okay, last question, because we're coming up in the hour, and I appreciate your time so much. But I have to ask this question. Preparing for this call today, one thing I noticed is all the pictures on your website have a smile. Talking to you, you have a constant smile. You deal with a very stressful, difficult, I know you have families like a civil war and you're in the middle of it and the arrows are flying over your head and the bullets behind your back. What do you do to keep your positive attitude and smile during the process so much? How do you do that?
Well, a big part of it was just, I mentioned this earlier, just you go home knowing you eased a burden. Even if they didn't say thank you or whatever, it's like, you did good work. You did important work. You helped make their lives better. And sometimes too, by kind of knowing how to handle the family dynamics, that all, and helping the people understand, especially the adult kids, just saying, she's not doing that on purpose. I mean, she really, like with dementia, she really can't remember. And that's its own art, is knowing how to work with people with dementia. And it just feels good when you make things better. And my colleagues feel the same way. It's just adult. Like I say, it's not like making fidget spinners or, a computer. Well, computer monitors, don't get me wrong, they are necessary. But when you're really face to face with that person and they really appreciate, and their life is better by what you've done, that keeps us all smiling.
And so if I could rephrase it, if you give me the permission, I would say you found how you make a contribution. Now, there are people who find their contribution in that computer screen. Good for them. That would be like a living hell for you, I think, to be just manufacturing all day long. But for you to be able to talk to people and see the product and see the family's faces, you obviously get great pleasure from that. And so thanks for sharing that with us. I appreciate it.
Oh, you bet. But also it's because no one wants to do this. Who wants to deal with the hoarding situation? One of the key things with our core values, one of the main values, is courage. And my colleagues, my staff will laugh at me when I say, you are courageous. They're just, but you had the courage to go into a hoarding situation and deal with it. How many people do you know who would be willing to do that? And you do it because you want to change this person's life. So it's a little bit different because you're really like the person's right in front of you and you're just transforming things. And it's such a pleasure.
Well, it's courageous if you're going to do it in a service approach, right? It's easy, to yell at your mom or yell at your parent and how stupid they are, but the courage is to stop and say, this isn't about me, it's about them. How do I serve them? And what do I say? How do I communicate in a way that helps them move forward? And that's, I think, where the courage comes from. Being patient takes courage. It's easy to be impatient.
I agree. And sitting there and listening, and also going into the family dynamics and just kind of trying to explain. First of all, with the adult children, it's explaining some things, but as I mentioned earlier, it's also thanking them for being there.
Yeah.
Everybody's going through it. It's people. There are too many people who don't recognize as it is that later life is so hard on people. They're living through it, but people completely ignore what the adult children go through. It is so hard to be that adult child, especially if you're what we call the DA in the family, designated adult. You're the one who takes care of mostly everything. I have a hunch that, Bill, you are or were the DA in your family.
I think I am. Yeah, I was. Yeah, well, the grown up, I was at, it was funny when my mother was widowed and remarried. We went to dinner one time with her future husband, and I said, I'm confused. Are you asking me if it's okay for you to get married? Like, I felt like I was the father and they're looking for my approval, but this is my mother, right? And I actually knew my stepfather was an attorney who I actually hired on a civil matter to represent me. So I knew him through business. I knew that he knew my father, and liked him. He was a nice guy, but it was very weird. Like, so yeah, I've worn the hat of the. And then when my sister got married, I had to go meet her future husband, and my mother needed me to sign off on it. So yeah, I've been that for a while, I guess. Yeah. I'm an adult. I adult for a living, I guess.
There you go. Yes, you do, Bill.
Marty, thanks so much. I really appreciate your time with us today. As always, we've met, previously, but this was a deeper dive. I appreciate what you do. We'll continue to look for you as you build out. Again, the company, Clear Home Solutions, clearhomesolutions.com. All this will be in the chat box, description down below on the YouTube channel. And then she mentioned an organization, NASM.org, which is a great place to learn more about if you're looking for that business or looking for other vendors like her in your local market area. Great source. And then she's building, and then pay attention to AgewiseAlliance.com, which is her passion project that she's building out here immediately in Southern California, but hopefully nationally, and love to be part of that. So,
next couple of years, you bet.
Mike, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time so much.
Thank you for your time and being here. And it's always great to talk with you. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks. I appreciate it. And for the rest of you, again, this is Probate Weekly. We do this every Thursday. Now, next week, we're moving from 4 p.m. Pacific time to 9 a.m. And we're changing the format from a YouTube live stream to a Zoom call again, back like we used to. So love to have you participate. That's the purpose of it. You'll get invitations and notices of that if you're registered. You can register at probateweekly.com, probateweekly.com. Just put in your email and register, and you'll get email reminders. Scroll down, you can sign up in the various audio formats you might like, Spotify and Apple and all that stuff. And then past episodes are available as well, clicking here. I'm Bill Gross, at Bill Gross Probate and social media. BillGrossProbate.com is the website. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week. Thank you for your support.